Welcome back for part 2 of the 1999 Acura RL starter replacement. Alright, so we're going to take a little detour and take care of the exhaust manifold stud that I cut. The star of the show is the shop iron stud extractor, part number 16023. We'll also be using a MAP Pro gas torch and beeswax to aid in the extraction. Yep, that should work pretty well. Now I'm hoping I just need one extension. Looks like just the one extension here should be good. So I've got a 24mm impact on this. So as it spins to the left, it's going to clamp onto the stud and hopefully spin it out. Alright, I'm going to heat this up real quick and then apply some beeswax and try to spin it out. Okay, I'm going to be careful where I'm pointing the heat too. So I'm going to try to get right up here on top without hitting the cylinder head. I don't want to heat the stud, I want to heat where it's passing through the exhaust manifold. Okay, gave it quite a bit of heat there. I'm just going to drop this on the top. So hopefully it soaks down into the threads. Just wiping this off a little bit so it doesn't drip on me. And it's out. That's nice and hot too. There it is. To remove the stud from the extractor's jaws, I use a large adjustable wrench and a breaker bar, turning the wrench clockwise. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is clean up those threads. So I have a thread chaser I'm going to use. It is a M10 by 1.25 thread pitch. I'm going to start by blowing some air up there to get any debris that might be in there out. So I've got this stuff here. This is Tap Magic. Don't necessarily have to use cutting oil. I would probably just get any type of oil that probably will work. Machine oil or maybe even engine oil would probably work just fine for this. All we're doing is chasing the threads. We're not creating new threads. So I got a little bit of oil on there. Just gonna thread this up in there to start it. Make sure I got the right one first. Okay, it is going in there. Pretty cleanly too. Okay, and I'm not doing this with any power tools at all. 13mm. Just gonna do it by hand first. I'll make sure I don't go too far so that it doesn't pass all the way through there. And just kind of back it out a little bit. So I felt some resistance. Okay, go back the other way. And back this way a little bit. Okay. I'm just going to blow this off. There's some oil in here, so that should help to clean the threads off of this thing. I want to be able to use this later on for something else, so make sure you clean this up right away. Then I'm going to blow this hole out also. Yeah, that looks really clean. Okay, so here are the two studs. This is our new one. This is our existing stud. One of the existing studs we pulled out. You see this little shoulder area right here? So it's going to thread into the manifold up to this point on each one of these. And on this end, it is roughly, looks like about a 1/16 of an inch longer than our old one. So I'm not going to touch this one at all. I was going to cut it down, but I'll just leave it as is. Alright, so I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize on this end. That's going to thread up into the manifold. There it is right there. So thread that in. Hopefully I won't block your view, but I most likely will. Alright, so I'm going to put on 2 nuts. These came in the kit that I bought, so I'll just use them. 2 nuts. And I saw somebody mention using a washer between the 2 nuts. I'm going to try that. Apparently it makes it easier to get the second nut off, which makes sense. So what we're going to do, we're trying to keep the second nut stationary, spin this first nut clockwise, and that'll create basically one giant nut. So we can spin this whole thing down. The only problem is I have very little space. I can't get a tool on the second nut that's closest to the exhaust manifold. So I'm going to do what I can here. 17 millimeter. Run that down. I can see the 2 nuts are spinning together, so that's good. Okay. Okay, so I've got a ratchet here. I'm just going to spin this down a little further. And I think that's good enough. Okay, and now I need to get the second nut off. What I'm going to do there is just turn it this way and just kind of give it a quick yank. Try that one more time. Make sure that second nut doesn't move. There we go. That's okay. Right there. Spin these 2 off. And that is in. So there's our stud. Okay, so I sanded this down a little bit with 180, then I hit it with 400, and that is about all I'm going to do on this. We use this right here, Rust-Oleum high heat, and has a ceramic coating it apparently, and it's good for up to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is black. I could not find brown local here, so just go with black. Nobody's going to see this anyway. It is a little bit cool out today, so I'm going to have to give this some time to dry. So you're supposed to apply 2 coats back to back, and then you can apply additional coats after about an hour. But since it's kind of cool out today, I'm probably just going to do the 2 coats and that'll be it. Just going to mist on a little. And that's about all I'm going to do for this. So in about 5 minutes I'll put on a second coat and that'll be it for this. So I'm just going to help it dry a little bit. I have the blowgun here. I'm probably about 1.5 feet away. Okay, so I'm going to throw on a second coat now. Again, I'm about 1.5 feet, 2 feet away. All right, Alright, so that is done. I'm going to let that sit for probably about an hour or two before I put it on the car. Here's a remanufactured Denso starter. It's part number 2804197. It's a good idea to bench test the starter before installing it, but I just went ahead with the installation. I'll put a link in the description to a video on starter bench testing. Okay. Get it past the intermediate shaft here. Over that. Alright, so after a lot of contorting and just trying to figure out how to slide this up there, I finally got the starter in place. So this little outlet right here fell out as I was trying to put in the starter, so just be mindful of that. So I got that in there and it's pretty much in place. I just have to put all the bolts in now. Alright, so I've got the top bolts started. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but I don't want to force it in, and I also have to hold one hand on the tail end of the starter so that it doesn't tilt downward while I'm trying to put the bolt in. So I've got that one started. I'm going to start the other one now too. That's the lower bolt. Okay. And actually that's pretty tight right there. Alright, I'm going to call that good. Alright, so I've got the nut right there on that wire and just pulling back on this little bulb while I try to tighten this. Actually, I don't need to do that now. I've got the socket on there. 12 millimeters. Torque spec is very minimal at about 6.5 foot-pounds, so don't get too carried away with this one. I'm not using a torque wrench at all. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Put our cover on. Okay, that's on. And then this wire here, make sure this lines up with the connector up here. Alright, so our starter is now in place. Wiring is all hooked up. Okay, we're going to put the engine mount bracket in next. Hopefully I remember how this came out. Okay, I think we got something here maybe. Let's see here. On the studs. Something like that. We'll get all the bolts in a second, but yeah, that's fun to put in. Okay, so I lowered the engine just a little bit because the stud for the engine mount was getting caught on this bracket. So by lowering the car a little bit, it made the engine mount a little straighter and freed that stud of this bracket. So I don't have the weight of the engine on the engine mount or the bracket. It's still on the jack, but at least I've got this a little bit freer now so I can get these bolts started. Alright, I'm going to work on the second lower bolt. I'm not snugging either one of these up because I still got to put the top bolt in. Okay, there's still a little bit of a gap between the engine mount and the bracket. That's because I still haven't tightened those bolts down. So I'm going to work on tightening those down, and then we'll drop the bracket down onto the engine mount. All right, 40 foot-pounds, 17 millimeters. Alright, so I'm going to tighten the top bolt, which is very hard to see, so I am going to be reaching from the front of the car to the back. I've got a 17mm deep socket, again 40 foot-pounds. Okay, so it's a bit challenging to get a torque wrench in this area. I'm just going to snug it up by feel. Alright, so there is the top nut. Hopefully I don't knock you over here. It's 47 foot-pounds. Alright, so this is the bracket that goes on top of the engine mount. You can see it's slotted. So I've got the bolt started, and then what I'll do is just plop this down over the bolt, slide it this way, and then cinch the bolt down the rest of the way. Alright, so I've got the 17mm for the engine mount in the front over here, ready to go. I'm just going to drive it in. I'm not going to tighten it just yet. I want to get the other side in before I tighten both down. Alright, 17mm, 52 foot-pounds. Okay, once again, 17mm, 52 foot-pounds. Alright, so since I didn't bench test the starter, I'm gonna try starting it. I don't have the alternator installed. I also don't have the exhaust on, so it's gonna sound pretty loud. I'm just gonna give it a quick flick and then turn it off. So it started, and yeah, that was pretty loud. Alright, so I'm changing out gaskets on the Y pipe, and I'm gonna take this one off here. And keep trying to be careful because I may have to reuse this one. I'm not confident this one's going to fit. Here's the replacement, 31615. I think it was a Walker gasket. So I don't have the Honda part. You can see this one's a little taller. Yeah, it's tearing up on the inside. So I don't really have much choice at this point. This one does not fit right. And you can see it's starting to come apart on the inside too, so I'm just going to use the old one. Alright, so I'm going to go for these gaskets, and I happen to have the OEM parts for these. 18212-671-003. Made in Japan. Careful not to break my screwdriver. That one. So this doesn't look too bad, but if your surfaces look really rusty, then you're going to want to clean this up a little bit. So I could grab a wire brush here, brush this off just a little bit here. We'll put our new one in. Flat side against the pipe here. So there's a flat side and a round side. It's in. To the other side now. Flat side and round side. Perfect fit. That's why I like using Honda parts. Alright, so before I put the Y pipe in, I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize on these threads here. And I don't need to have it on the whole thread. I'm just going to have it near where the nut's going to actually cinch down. That should be good. Alright, so I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize on the stud that goes into this bracket here, because I want to get a nut on there as soon as I get it in there. And I'll hope to stabilize it so it doesn't pop off. And the nut is part number 90361 SP0013. So hopefully this doesn't break off. It looks like it's ready to come off here, but I think we'll be okay. I'm going to try to be careful with it though. Put that up there. This down here. Back through here. Nut on. Again, the nut is not going to be fastened down tight right now. I just want to get it stable. Okay, just get a few threads. White pipe's up there, and then this side here. Okay, let me get some nuts on over here and up there, and then we will worry about this. Alright, so I have nuts installed up there. Crazy angle on that top one as usual. So we will tighten these down in a second. I want to get all the other nuts installed first before I tighten anything down. Okay, I'm going to put a little anti-seize on these. Alright, then I'll put this bracket on. Right there, and over here. Just going to let that hang for a second. A lot of two-finger action on this job. Man, stuff is really hard to reach. This is actually pretty easy compared to some of the other things I've had to reach. Start these in now. This one I'm not going to put anti-seize on. These weren't that hard to take off last time. I say that now, but next time I have to take these off, they won't come off. So you can put anti-seize if you like. We've got that started. Okay, I'm going to put these bolts in now. Got a little bit of anti-seize on the threads. I also had to clean the threads up a little bit. Okay, so I got that up in there. Alright, so the spring bolt on this side looks like it's lined up with the holes. So what I'm going to do now, because I can't get the nut on, it's trying to, basically two opposing forces here, trying to put the nut on and hold this at the same time. So what I'm going to do is put this one in. Try to draw it in a little bit. Pop the nut on there. So this is a 12. Okay, I'm going to stop right there because I don't want to go past our torque spec too. So I've got threads showing there. I'll throw the nut on. Okay, so I got this on the threads. Okay, so now it's just a matter of tightening all these things down. Alright, so we're going to start by tightening down the Y pipe nuts. So these are 14 millimeters, 40 foot-pounds. I'm going to start with the hardest one, because if that doesn't go well, then yeah, that is the one way up here on this side that I had trouble getting off. Okay, so again, swivel socket, cannot use a swivel adapter. That will not work on this nut. So there, and then the angle that I'm holding this at goes past the transmission way over here. There it goes. There we go. Okay, and I'm out. That is it for me today on that. Okay, so I'm going to tighten these two bolts down. This one here, that one there. 28 foot-pounds, 14 millimeters. Alright, so this one here is 12 millimeters. I don't know the torque spec for this. I'm guessing it's probably like 16 foot-pounds, something like that. So it's going to tighten it down. Okay. Alright, 16 foot-pounds, 16. This one up here, I might do this one by feel. 14 on there. Hopefully it'll hit up against the cap, stop itself. Take the wrench off, reposition it. Now I'll try that. There we go. These are both 16 foot-pounds, 12 millimeters. That's good there. A little tighter. That's good. 16 foot-pounds isn't a whole lot. The open inside this one. And all I'm doing on this one is just looking at the number of threads over here. Looks like about 5. So I'll just spin it down to the same number. That's pretty close. We're going to call that good. Okay, I'm going to put the axle back in. Put a little bit of anti-seize on the splines there. Got a little bit carried away with it. So I'm going to flip this out this way. And we're going to put this in. That lined up straight as possible. There we go. So just go ahead and put the axle through the hub. I think the axle's going to go through the It's going to go through the knuckle here. I think I got the splines lined up correctly. We'll find out in a second. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and lift this into the lower control arm. There we go. Okay, axle nut. That's going to draw the axle in. 36 millimeter. Put the screwdriver in here. Okay, so that is tight just by hand right now. So I need to torque that down. So do that in a bit. Okay, so before I tighten the axle nut down, I'm going to put some of these other things back on first, just in case something goes wrong. So I've got the castle nut. Goes down here. Okay. Alright, so we're going to put on our damper fork next. Start the bolting up here. And one down here. There we go. And I got a brand new nut also. That's required. Okay. We have to move this fork up too to make sure it's touching where it needs to touch up there before we tighten anything down. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is tighten the damper fork bolt and nut. So I need to jack up the car to put the weight on the suspension and take it off the jack stand. So I'll do that first. Alright, so the torque spec for the bolt up top is 32 foot-pounds, and the torque spec for the nut below is 51 foot-pounds. Alright, so the castle nut, which is right there, torque spec is 51 to 58 foot-pounds. I'm going to tighten it down to 51 foot-pounds to start because there are some holes we need to line up for the cotter pin. And this one is 24 millimeters. Okay, so there is our hole after turning the torque wrench to 51 foot-pounds. So we should be okay to get a cotter pin in there. Alright, so I'm going to put the cotter pin in. So the closest cotter pin they have in the stores is 1/8 of an inch by 1 inch. So 1/8 of an inch thick, 1 inch long. The standard cotter pin is 3 millimeters by 22. So it's pretty close. And so I can get this out next time, I'm not going to put the cotter pin in this way. I'm going to put it in this way. With the tail, the longest part of the tail on this side like that. Hopefully you can see that. So this way. So this, see that long part? It's going to wrap around the bottom of the stud. It's going to hold it in like that and then bend this one around. And then this one goes up. Grab some pliers for that one. Okay, so we're going to tighten the axle nut now. I got a 36 millimeter socket and a torque wrench. This one goes up to 250 foot-pounds. I have a screwdriver here to keep this from rotating. It's going to push down. Now I like to use my foot on this, so I'm going to carefully push down because I know, of course, the legs are stronger than your hands, but I have bad shoulders, so I'm trying to be careful here. So I just did that nice and slow with my foot, right up here where my hands would normally go, and it's 181 foot-pounds. Alright, so with this same broken screwdriver I just used, like I said, I keep this around. This is kind of I used this a long time ago. This actually is a friend's screwdriver. We were replacing the timing belt and water pump on an Acura Legend, and the screwdriver broke, so we just kind of kept this around. So right here, you need to make a divot to lock this axle nut onto the drive shaft. So I'm just going to use this. You can also use a punch of some kind, but this seems to work pretty well. Sledgehammer. That's pretty much it. Okay, so before we go too far, I start putting things back together up top here. Don't forget, you got a couple connectors back there that need to be put back on brackets. So I would start first of all with the one that goes on the engine mount bracket. Make sure you get those back on. And then we'll put on the exhaust manifold cover next. Alright, so you may not be able to see a whole lot, but I'm going to put the exhaust manifold cover back in. I think I've got everything else clipped in where it needs to go. So I did the engine mount bracket down there. That was really tough. So if you add a little bit of silicone paste on the bracket, because it has a little bit of rust on it, that should help slide those connectors back on. So I'm talking about these two way down there. This bracket for the alternator, I think it needs to kind of go down and around it, but we're going to experiment with that because I don't remember how this came out. Battery cable out of the way. And straight back. This could take a little while. So don't get frustrated on this one. It is a lot of this starter replacement is a lot of Tetris, really. It's just a ton of stuff that just doesn't seem like it fits correctly. So it just takes a little bit of time. Okay, it looks like it's hung up on this AC line over here, this big one. This one right here. So let's get it past that. So it appears that the next obstacle is the O2 sensor, which is right over there. So we'll get it past that, and I think we should be able to bolt it in after that. There we go. So just about there. Next part is going to be getting our holes to line up for the cover. I would recommend putting the bolt in the front here first. Do that one, get it started, and then go after the one in the back. Alright, so I don't know how much of this you can see, but I am going to line up the holes. You can see the hole right there. Looks like it's lined up right there. Simultaneously, I'm going to put a bolt in. There it is. There we go. Okay, so the problem I was having was that I was putting the bolt in at an angle. It really needs to go straight in. So, especially when you're trying to reach with one hand like this, you'd have a tendency to tilt it up a little bit. So just kind of fight that tendency and then just go straight in. Okay, so you're definitely not going to see anything on this one. So what I'm going to do is actually go in back-handed with my left hand. So I've got that one pretty much cinched down so that the cover won't move at all. That one's in. So yeah, backhanded works pretty well on that one with your left hand. Okay, so the torque specs on the exhaust manifold covers is 16 foot-pounds, and those are 12 millimeters. So I'm just going to tighten them down by hand and call it good. Good there. So I've got this wrench here that has 4 sizes on it, but the cool thing about it is that it's really thick, so a lot of times it can reach fasteners that other wrenches can't reach. Okay, that one is tight. That bracket there is the white clip, bracket over here. Alright, I'm going to put the alternator in off camera, because I've already done a video on that, and also that includes you want to make sure you tighten down the belt correctly to the proper tension. So I'll post links to those two videos and you can check them out. Alright, so I am just about done here. I have to put the battery back in, but don't forget to also hook up the vacuum hoses to this one bracket. There's two of them. Then, of course, a bunch of connectors that go back on the brackets kind of in this area. I think there's like 3 or 4 left here. So I'll do that, and then we'll put the battery back in. Alright, so I've got all the connectors back on. This one here, I probably should have put that back on while I was doing the starter. This was a pain to get back on here afterwards. So just be mindful of this one. Okay, I'm going to put the battery tray back in. So the battery hold down, I'm not going to put that on right now. There we go. 10 millimeters. And negative. Alright, so there you have it. There's replacing the starter on the 1999 Acura RL. So hopefully this information was helpful, and thanks for watching.